Presiding Chancellor, colleagues, graduands, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Professor David Jamieson. David is Professor of Physics at the University of Melbourne, having completed his PhD in physics here in 1985. In a distinguished career in physics research, David has published over 280 papers with Australian and international collaborators and has served as President of the Australian Institute of Physics and Head of the School of Physics at the University of Melbourne. He's been a finalist in Australia's National Awards for University Teaching and convened the group that developed the Decadal Plan for Physics in Australia. David is a Chief Investigator of the Victorian node of the Australian Research Council's Centre for Quantum Computation and Communication Technology, a centre working on new ways of storing and processing information using the laws of quantum mechanics. David was one of the first academics to engage closely with the issues around climate change, introducing the topic into his university lectures as long ago as 1990. He is an engaged scholar, keen to expand public understanding of science, particularly the discipline of physics. I call on Professor Jamieson to deliver the occasional address.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, scholars, Presiding Chancellor and distinguished colleagues, I would like to speak to you today of authority and the future, and also of Galileo. I want to start with a reference to the Boyer Lectures given a few years ago by our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Glyn Davis, in which he describes the Republic of Learning, otherwise known as the university system. In this republic of global reach and membership, there is a relentless quest for new innovation and ideas, a free exchange of the best and brightest people, and the participation of students young and old. That would be you. In my view, this Republic of Learning has led to the greatest flowering of civilization the world has ever seen, at least for those who enjoy its benefits. Never have there been times like this, with unprecedented access to power, information, and ever more sophisticated and versatile gadgets which are set to silent mode in your pockets. I'm sure, as future ages will judge us, they will consider us the most fortunate people who have ever lived. In my own modest contributions to the Republic of Learning, as has already been said in the introduction, I'm working on developing the technology for the quantum internet of the 21st century. This new internet will be required to solve some of the biggest problems that are presently beyond the reach of current technology. We can look forward to a secure quantum communication system to control the highly dispersed power grid of the future. We can also look forward to quantum computers that could perhaps design new drugs, possibly even antibiotics, from the laws of physics rather than the traditional use of test tubes as now. Perhaps even new methods for sensing the fundamental electromagnetic machinery of the processes of life in single cells. And you can read more about this in our National Innovation Statement for Australia on the government website. But what is the most important engine of the Republic of Learning that drives all of this? It's none other than thinking, a new way of thinking, a way of thinking that was developed 400 years ago. In the words of Professor Davis, this new way of thinking replaced a way of thinking based on revealed truth with one based on rational inquiry, using mathematics, systematic observation, and later new instruments such as the quadrant and the telescope to explore the actual movement of heavenly bodies. Professor Davis is clearly invoking Galileo. So let me now return to the first research physicist, Galileo, and his revolutionary contributions to the Republic of Learning. Galileo was born in 1564 at a time when the Renaissance was well underway in the part of the world where he lived and worked. But when Galileo was born, there were strict boundaries between what could be explained by the emerging discipline of science and what required supernatural intervention. Yet by the time Galileo died at his house in the hills above Florence in 1642, his discoveries had changed the world, and those boundaries were being redrawn. How had he done this? Well, when Galileo first turned his telescope to the celestial sphere over 400 years ago, starting first in November of 1609, he recorded in his notebooks an avalanche of new observations: mountains and valleys on the moon, sunspots on the sun, rings around Saturn, and 4 tiny bright moons orbiting Jupiter. For the first time, a human being had seen objects that unquestionably orbited another planet, not the Earth. At the same time, he was developing a great textbook on the laws of physics. One of the laws, we could call today Galileo's theory of relativity, allowed him to displace the Earth from the centre of the universe and set it in motion around the sun. By uncovering the laws of physics from direct observation, from experiment, he was able to counter the overwhelming evidence of our senses that the universe revolves around us. As a matter of fact, this is one of the topics I'm teaching right now in the lecture theatres of this university. But let me give you a short highlight that eventually led me to Florence a few years ago. Galileo recorded in his notebook in January of 1613, as he had done for many years already, a sketch of Jupiter and its 4 bright tiny moons. And there happened to be 2 stars that appeared close to Jupiter that night as Jupiter drifted across the sky in its orbit. Galileo labelled these 2 stars Fixa, for fixed star. One of these stars can be identified in modern star charts. The other cannot be identified in any star in any modern chart. That is because, ladies and gentlemen, it was not a star. In fact, we now know 234 years before it was officially discovered, Galileo was observing the planet Neptune, which resembled a star and cannot be seen with the unaided eye. On the night of January 28 of 1613, he noted something extraordinary. One of these 2 stars appeared to wander compared to the position of all the other stars. In other words, he had seen the star that was actually the undiscovered planet Neptune wander over a gap of only 24 hours, something only planets do. A wandering star. The word planet derives from the Greek word wanderer. Surely Galileo must have deduced that this wandering star was a new and undiscovered planet. But after making this entry in his notebook, Galileo did not observe the new planet again, nor has there ever been any evidence found that he knew he had seen the first new planet to be discovered by humanity since deep antiquity. What a sensational discovery! A new planet with no mention in any ancient text. Could this knowledge have been dangerous? Perhaps because he could not find the faint planet in the sky again to confirm his discovery, he took the secret to his grave to leave to others to renew the discovery. Well, now my journey to Florence. A few years ago, I came up with a somewhat fanciful theory that physical evidence in the ink in Galileo's notebook could provide evidence that he realised he'd discovered a new planet. Word of my fanciful theory went a little viral on the internet. I did live radio interviews in Colombia. I got hundreds of outraged emails from serious Galileo scholars. The BBC did a program on Neptune. They interviewed me and employed an actor to say in English with a bad Italian accent what I thought Galileo might have been thinking on those fateful nights when he observed the wandering star. After a complex sequence of events, I was invited to Florence. I went to the National Library, was escorted through the public areas, through the closed areas, and into the ancient and rare manuscripts section out the back. And into my shaking hands, the head librarian placed the greatest artefact of our Republic of Learning, indeed of our scientific civilization, Galileo's actual astronomical notebooks. Wow. Somewhat overwhelmed, I had 2 hours to search through the notebooks looking for evidence, not recognised until now, that Galileo knew he'd discovered a new planet. The forceful nature of Galileo's personality was immediately evident from the bold strokes of his handwriting, the impatient crossing out of observations made doubtful by cloud, and the frequent splatters of ink and other substances, to say nothing of the faint whiff of cooking fires from 4 centuries past. Sadly, I did not find out what I was looking for. There was too much material and not enough time. Later, perhaps, I'll return to this quest. In any case, would Galileo's authority have been enough to convince a sceptical world of his discovery, especially if it could only be seen through his telescope? I suspect the world of 1613 was not ready for this news. These days, we have seen the rise of fake news. This can originate from those without authority seeking to undermine well-established science and cast doubt where it suits their agenda. In much the same way, doubt was cast on the Earth being in orbit around the Sun. In fact, today, a BBC report on a commentator calls for schools to train students now on how to recognise fake news. He goes on, distinguishing what is true from what is not is a critical judgment, and you have to question, think critically. That's a very important task. I call on you, new graduates, to rise to this challenge. I call on you to use the authority you have obtained from your studies to decide your future, to discriminate between those who speak with authority from those who do not. The future of the planet will depend on the choices you make as you shape your future. Today, the scope of human knowledge is vast and deep, and we face many challenges crying out for new revolutions. Are there opportunities to make breakthroughs as profound as those made by Galileo 400 years ago? A revolution so profound that 400 years from now, people will still be referring to it in graduation ceremony addresses? Perhaps it's impossible for there to be another Galileo, but I entreat you to prove me wrong. On behalf of all of you, many thanks to all the parents and the support people who have helped get you where you are today. You are very special and patient people. And to all the new graduates, my best wishes for your future careers. Thank you.